You're listening to RHR Talks, the podcast where the RHR team talks all things recruitment and advertising. We're going to be covering various topics on which we're regularly asked by candidates and hiring managers and offering our industry insight, which we hope you'll find useful, whether you're looking for that next opportunity or just to find the best talent. I'm Paul Walsh, one of the consultants at RHR. Each week, I'm going to be joined by my colleague and now podcast co-host, Tim Maguire. Tim and I are going to be talking with recruitment and advertising experts from various areas of our business. This week, Tim and I are joined in conversation with external guest Emily Hawkins-Longley. We discuss her career and journey into the world of HR.
You're listening to RHR Talks. As always, my name is Paul. I'm one of the consultants here at RHR. Tim, I will give you the pleasure of being able to introduce yourself rather than me introduce you because you are back. You weren't on
the last taking a short sabbatical, but yes, I'm one of the consultants at RHR working alongside Paul. Been here for 4 years and happy to be back.
Fab. We've got a really exciting guest on today. So like with Tim, Emily, I will let you introduce yourself.
Okay, hi. My name's Emily Hawkins-Longley, and I am an HR professional. Been in the HR profession for about 17 years, I think I worked out the other day.
Wow.
Which was quite scary. I thought it was going to be about 9, but no, for about 17 years, I think. And just sort of been working in various different companies, within the retail space, and more recently within media. So, I've got a bit of an insight into those sorts of businesses.
For 17 years in HR, what made you decide to pursue a career in HR?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I sort of fell into it. I mean, I started my kind of career journey. I wanted to be a fashion designer.
Okay.
So I did the whole sort of art college route and London College of Fashion and all of that stuff. And then, I don't know, I decided that was more of a hobby, really. I liked the creative stuff, but I actually liked doing it on my terms. So I sort of gave up on that idea, and I decided that I just needed a job. So I started out as an office junior, working in facilities actually for a government department. And whilst I was there, I worked quite closely with the HR team on all sorts of people issues. I mean, varying things like someone who needed a desk fan from, somebody that was like really ill and we needed to make adjustments for and things.
Yeah.
So I got quite interested in what they do. So that was where I sort of got an idea as to what HR was about. And I got a job working at Battersea Power Station on the redevelopment there.
Oh, wow. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was really interesting because I started there very, very junior position. And then what happened was the HR manager went on maternity leave and the HR officer went back to Australia. And I was left the only person in HR. And they knew at that point that they were going to sell the power station to a new company. So they didn't recruit anybody. And I remember this meeting where they said to me, we're not going to replace the other people in HR. Are you all right to kind of keep things ticking along? And I was like, oh.
Thrown straight into the deep end, that is, yeah.
And then the next meeting was, so we're going to sell the power station. You need to choopy everybody over to the new company. And then it's quite likely that there'll be redundancies. Are you happy to do that? And I went, yes. And then I went back to my desk and I Googled choopy because I didn't know what it meant.
Love that.
That is a sink or swim situation, but sometimes it's the best way to learn initially.
Act like you know what you're doing and then Google it later. I think that's a great life motto.
But that was where I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So, and at that point I said to them, I am happy to do these things, but I think I need a bit of training or something. And that's when I started studying my CIPD.
Yeah.
And I did a certificate, and then I went on to do a postgrad, and eventually, years later, got a master's degree. But that was where I was like, okay, this is actually quite dangerous because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, so you're not having to Google stuff anymore as much.
No. Luckily, I think I think now I've encountered most scenarios that I sort of know what you need to do. But yeah, back then it was quite scary. So yeah, that was a real kind of sink or swim time. And yes, but I had to troop everyone over to the new company and make everybody redundant, including myself, which, you know.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Nice. That must have been a tough meeting.
Yeah, my letter was addressed to me from me.
Wow, that is a unique situation, I'm sure.
If you have any problems, just take it up with yourself, basically.
Yeah. I know, it was such a weird position to be in, but yeah, it was good. But it really did sort of show me that there's so much to HR that you do need to kind of learn your stuff, and you can't really just try and blag your way through it like it's
sure.
So after that, because I realised I didn't know what I was doing, I thought, right, I need to study. And I also need to figure out because there's so many aspects of HR, I didn't really know what route I wanted to go down. So I started doing these fixed term contracts, which I would still recommend to anybody who wants to a career in HR to have a go at doing some short fixed term contracts. So I was doing sort of 6-month contracts. I worked for the Arcadia Group. I did sort of Cineworld cinemas, sort of real sort of like a mixture of places. And again, retail I really like because of the pace, and I quite like that sort of having to make quick decisions and stuff. And even now, if I get a CV and it's somebody who's got a retail background, I'll always want to speak to them because I know that they've been through it. They've had a real good experience of HR. So yeah, I made the conscious sort of decision to do these fixed term contracts to kind of build my experience. So I did a period of time of just doing recruitment, and I did a period of time just doing employee relations. So dealing with disciplinaries and grievances on a daily basis, and then ended up at Swarovski, where I was there for a couple of years. And doing a regional role, sort of travelling throughout the country in Ireland. I did so much travelling. The sort of travelling that now just seems ridiculous with Zoom and whatnot.
Well, that's the thing. With remote working, I find that travelling might be, obviously there's going to be elements to it, but some of the regional positions that we've recruited for in the past, people are living like 3 days in a hotel room and it just doesn't have to happen anymore. But I can imagine that's quite tough.
Yeah, I used to fly. I'd go up to Scotland. I'd get like a really early flight, fly up to Scotland, arrange meetings near the airport, do as many meetings as I could do, and then fly back in the evening.
Wow, that must have been hard after a while.
Yeah, it was really difficult. And then whilst I was there, I fell pregnant with my daughter.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I remember I was still flying, and then I was at the airport, and then they wouldn't let me walk through the scanner thing. And I thought, I don't know if I should be flying anymore because I'm that. But the doctor was like, it's fine. But yeah, at that point I was like, I don't know if this flying business is going to work out for me now. So we had to recruit my maternity cover early because of the travelling aspect I just couldn't really do. And after that, I was like, how am I going to do this when I actually have this child? So that's when I made the decision not to return. I didn't return after maternity leave purely because of that travelling aspect, which, like you say, now you just think you probably wouldn't be expected to do quite so much. And then once you do have a child, like the things that you need from your job sort of change because your job needs to fit in with your life a lot more. And I had a go at doing some fixed term contracts because I quite liked the thing of going into a company, using your experience to sort of go, you could do things this way, and quite quickly being able to make a bit of a difference, and then sort of leaving them to it and going off and doing something else. And I also found that you got more flexibility from those fixed term positions because they were kind of a bit like, it's only a temporary thing, she needs to go do a drop off or pick up, it's fine.
It's great exposure as well, isn't it? I think in terms of the brands that you can work for, a lot of candidates that I've worked with, I recruit quite heavily within the HR space, and I think some people are a little bit initially quite adverse to it, but actually you're building your HR network up because all the people that you come into contact with, and it helps people out a lot more perhaps when they are, making moves, because it's such a small world, especially if you look at an industry like retail, for example. Everyone knows each other. It's the same in recruitment. So it's I think it's quite beneficial to look at those fixed term contracts.
Yeah, absolutely. And they are quite enjoyable. And it's quite nice to, you know that you've got an end date, and often it gets extended by a couple of months or something. But you know that you're working towards an end date. So everything that you're doing, you're sort of keeping in mind that you're going to need to leave it in a good state at the end. And it's quite a positive way to leave a job, not, well, I found somewhere else I want to go on to. Well, we all know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I quite enjoyed doing that. And like I said, it did offer me the flexibility with the nursery drop off and pick up and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then eventually made the move into media, which was quite interesting.
That's an interesting.
How was that jump?
Yeah, because me and Tim were talking about this. Tim and I were talking about this before, and it's something that a lot of people who perhaps are predominantly retail focused, they do look to expand into other markets. Like Tim just said, how did you find that transition?
It was interesting. I think that the thing is, when you've worked in retail and you're used to that fast pace, I think that the adjustment is when you go. I mean, I did a stint at a financial services company, and I absolutely hated it because everything was so much slower.
Right.
And you have to follow. They're very into sort of process. I mean, obviously you need to have processes, but they're very sort of regimented processes. So when you're in retail, you're always thinking of like these shades of grey that you need to navigate. And I used to always say to my teams, you think about the outcome that you want to achieve, and then let's work backwards from there and see sort of how we get there.
Yeah.
Where in a more sort of regimented environment, it doesn't matter what the outcome is that you're looking for. You just follow the process and then see what happens.
Right, but then you almost lose sight of what your original goal was.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a bit of a waste of energy. If you're doing a redundancy and you know that you're going through the motions with somebody and they're kind of going, oh, I'm fine. Like I'm quite happy to leave actually. Whereas in a more regimented environment, well, we have to have another meeting and we have to do,
Right.
Whereas in the slightly more sort of fast-paced environment, she'd be like, well, there's no point in us having another meeting. If you're happy, I'm just going to write you a letter that says that, you wanted to draw it to a close early, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I find, but media is quite similar. Like, they don't want to mess around. People chase you on things. So you do have that fast pace again. And I guess it depends on the sort of environment. If you're working for example, the magazines, everything's on a monthly cycle. So, they have busy times. They have times where they have downtime, which makes you busier because whenever they have downtime, they have time to think about all the issues and things that they want help with.
Right, of course. Yeah, that makes sense.
So, yeah, you're sort of on this cycle with them. And yeah, if an editor of a magazine wants an answer to something, you don't leave them waiting. You know that you need to get back to them pretty quick.
Yeah.
So you still got that sort of like being on edge a little bit most of the time, where you're sort of like, right, you need to really think about what I'm doing, how am I going to manage my time, what's the priority of the day, and that sort of thing. So I guess the transition into media wasn't quite so bad because it was a similar pace, I'd say, to retail in that regard.
Yeah.
But you don't have the same sort of level of employee relations things that you might do in a retail environment. You might get, I don't know, a disciplinary sort of once every 6 months or something. But when big things happen, they are big,
Yeah,
right. I can imagine.
If it's going to kick off, it kicks off. But whereas in retail, it might be sort of more sort of minor things, sort of going like ticking along. So yeah, I found that quite interesting. And the sort of the people working in media are there for their career. It's a definite decision to be there and to build their career. So you get people staying in their roles for longer periods of time than you might do within retail.
Yeah. For those people who don't know as well, it might be worth just highlighting, those media businesses that you've worked for, because they are pretty impressive. Talk about some of the companies that you've worked for on the media side.
Yeah, so I worked for Hearst magazines, looking after their luxury titles and their weekly titles. I worked for Read Business Information, looking after their sort of B2B titles, and I also had New Scientist titles like that. And then more recently, I worked for Condé Nast, where I pretty much focused again on the luxury side, but Vogue was sort of my biggest title, and GQ.
Wow.
And I also looked after the digital team, which was very interesting. But yeah, and then more recently worked for advertising agencies, M&C Saatchi, and at the moment I'm doing a contract role at Mother. So yeah, I'd say Condé Nast, I was there for a big chunk of time. Absolutely loved working there, and it was a bit of a story really, because I wrote to Vogue when I was 14.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And I said, this is when I was thinking about my fashion route. And I said, could I come and do work experience for you? I'll do anything that you want me to.
Yeah. I'll make coffee.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a reply, which I didn't actually expect to get a reply. And I had this letter. And it was just like amazing that I got, they turned me down, but I got a reply, which was just like amazing. But I was too young, because you had to be 18 to.
Of course.
So, but the fact that I got this reply, which I just thought was awesome. And I got a call from a recruiter saying, I've got this job, it's in magazines. And I just said, is it Condé Nast? And they said, oh, yes, it is. I was like, right, I'm in.
Let's do it.
Coming full circle. Did you keep that letter by any chance? That would have been quirky on your first day to show that.
No, do you know what? I couldn't find it, but the woman that wrote me that signed the letter was still working there. And I met her sort of a couple of weeks in, and I said to her, I have to tell you that I wrote to Vogue when I was 14, and
that's amazing.
I think you replied. And she went, oh, did I? Oh, good for me that I replied to you. Thank God I replied to you. Because here we are, I was then sort of helping her with quite high level issues at Vogue, and it was just amazing to sort of end up there. It was the stars aligned, and I ended up there. So yeah, it was quite amazing. And she and I got on quite well, and I had to work with her quite closely. So it was quite an awesome story to actually be there in the end.
Definitely. It's crazy that it came full circle, because I can imagine they must get loads of letters like that.
Yeah.
They do, and they do try. They did sort of try and respond to as many as they can. And I said to them, like, I would really encourage you to do that, because you don't know where these people are going to end up. And
case in point of yourself.
Yeah, as someone said to me actually when I was at the start of my career, as a very senior person, gave me some feedback, and I said to him, I was like, why you don't need to give me this feedback. You're thinking he was a CEO. And he went, look, I learned a long time ago that you have to treat those people that you meet on your way up very well, because you don't know if you will meet them again on your way down.
But I can imagine a lot of people forget that as well. So it's really good when you do come across people who would give you that time. What about, I was quite keen to find out a little bit more about some of the more strategic HR highlights, obviously being in a generalist position, looking at recruitment, ER and L&D and all of that side of things. But what about some of the sort of key issues? I'm sure you know what they are, like gender pay gap, diversity, wellbeing. Have you had much involvement in that area for HR?
Yeah, of course. Particularly wellbeing during the pandemic.
Of course. Yeah,
it's been really difficult for a lot of people. But I guess the thing that one of the major things that I've learned, particularly with diversity and inclusion, when I was at Vogue, whilst I was there, Alex Shulman left as editor, and Edward Enninful joined the title as editor. And the transformation in the title, like literally overnight, was amazing. I mean, and Alex actually said when she left, I've had my Vogue and Edward will have his. And that was really, I mean, of course, but when you think about any business where you have a change in leadership, you automatically sort of have a slight shift in sort of cultural direction, I think.
Or vision, I bet.
Yeah, and but I guess it's heightened in somewhere like Vogue where, it's somebody's background and differences, I guess, are very much brought to the fore with the direction they want to take the title in. And he had a different type of person sort of applying for roles. It just seemed to make the title a bit more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of taught me a lesson in diversity and inclusion, in that you can have the policies in place, you can do the awareness events and everything, but if your leadership team doesn't really reflect the people that you're trying to attract, if they can't see somebody that's a bit like themselves there, then why would it doesn't
almost really, just for show. Yeah,
like you can talk about it all you like, but it had such a big impact. But also, not just because of the way that he is, but it's kind of the way that he would talk to people taught me something, because he would make you feel like he's giving you his full attention. Doesn't matter that you're from HR and nobody knows who you are outside of Condé Nast. I remember I was having a cup of tea with him, and his PA knocks on the door and said, "Oh, Manalo's outside," and I was like, "Manalo, like the shoe guy."
Love that.
And he was like, "Yeah, tell him I'll be 10 minutes." I was like, "What?" No, it's fine. I'll go. I'll go. He was like, no, we were in the middle of talking about something. I was like, wow. Okay. But that sort of giving someone your time and making them feel like they're as important as anybody else, for me, that is the definition of diversity, is that ability to talk to people of all levels about all sorts of things. And he's got that, which I think means more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And I've tried to sort of carry that through with the other things I've done at M&C Saatchi and now at Mother, sort of looking at your policies and things and thinking about do your policies make somebody feel like you understand them? That thing of, I'm on your level and I get what you're going through, or, so for me, it's sort of thinking about that in terms of the language that you use and when you're sending out emails, and it sort of helped shift my perspective a bit. So there was that. And then I think I told you guys, I also do work with victim support.
Yes.
Which sort of has really helped my view of the world, I guess, that you talk to people from all sorts of different places. Those people have no idea who I am. To them, I'm just Emily from victim support. They don't know that an HR director or whatever.
Yeah.
So to them, I'm just supporting them, and I could be anybody in the world. And you have a different sort of conversation, and I have to. Part of my job is to help them through whatever trauma that they've been through. And so talking to people in that way has really helped sort of me think about how you support people and these wellbeing initiatives and what is actually going to be useful to people.
Yeah.
So it's just, that whole sort of diversity of perspective, I guess, I think is really key for HR professionals.
And just out of curiosity, how does it work being a support volunteer for victim support? Just in case anyone who's listening would be interested in doing it, how does it work in terms of registering and when you work or when you pick the calls?
Yeah, well, I looked it up and I found, they happen to be sort of, well, I think they're always looking for people, to be honest, to help.
Sure.
And I'm sure if you just did a Google search, you'd find the sort of local support within your area, and you could contact them and see what they might have available. So I've committed to doing 3 hours a week, which I can do during lunch times, and working from home is easier, definitely, because I can do it sort of around other things.
Sure.
but the training took a while, but it's all at the moment it's all online, so it's quite easy to do it. You have to have a lot of check-ins with your sort of support manager, just check that you're doing okay, because you're dealing with some quite heavy stuff. And I trained to do supporting serious crime first, and then I've gone on to do training on stalking support and domestic abuse. And the next thing I'm going to be training to do is serious sexual violence. So it gets heavier, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you have to be comfortable to sort of support those people. But yeah, and a lot of the time, you work with them on, we call it sort of coping and recovery. So, and I've tried to bring that into some of the wellbeing initiatives that I've been doing. So, particularly around the pandemic, this idea of at the moment we are coping with what's going on, and I believe there will be a period of time where we are then recovering from what happened. So it's very interesting, and you work with somebody on a support plan for them. You check in on them. We've got certain questions that you have to ask them every couple of weeks. And for domestic abuse, you put together sort of safety plans and whatnot. But a lot of the time, it's a kind of an hour-long conversation with someone to give them a bit of an outlet about what's happened to them. And lots of the things that have happened to them, the way that they feel about it is completely normal. And you're just reassuring them that, time will help, and you'll feel a bit better as time goes on, and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting, and it does sort of give you that sense of, I've done something really positive. People, which I would really encourage anybody that can do that sort of volunteering. If you feel that you've got the capacity to do it and you want to do it, then definitely I would recommend it.
Yeah, I can imagine your line of work as well, like you just mentioned before, linking into that whole well-being piece and actually taking a big learn from it, as well as obviously getting the reward of being able to give back. Just speaking of sort of learns, I have asked this question to a few people that we've had on the podcast, and it's just interesting to know what you've really taken away from, I keep saying the last 12 months, but actually my concept of time is not that great, because I feel like I don't know what year it is anymore. But, with the pandemic, and obviously it's been affected people as well as affected everyone, and in so many different ways, what's been your biggest learn that you've taken in terms of perhaps your career and your personal life as well?
Yeah, I think, I've got several children now, and it's during the first lockdown, with the novelty of it and it being summer. It was okay, and doing sort of homeschooling and working. But I was doing some quite tough meetings during that time. I'm sure lots of other HR professionals can relate to this, but doing Zoom sort of furlough meetings and whatnot. And it's it was hard, and it really makes you kind of rethink what you're doing and how you're doing things, I think. And I said to someone, I had a bit of an epiphany halfway through the pandemic, where I just thought about all of those people where I declined, been working with managers to decline flexible working requests, where we said, oh no, this role is definitely 100% in the office. You couldn't possibly have a day at home.
Yeah.
And now here we are. We're like, oh, actually,
I think everyone's mind on working from home and flexi kind of hours, it's just changed the whole game, hasn't it, compared to what it was like a year and a half ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And also sort of the balance of I've been doing things like the school pickup, which I never used to do. Do that, and realizing how short the school day actually is, and how long that time was that she was with a childminder until I would pick her up. Like I didn't actually have any concept of that before now.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because when you're in the office, you'd have you normally have meetings between the hours of like 2 and 5.
Sure.
And the day would go quite quickly. And so things like that has made me sort of really reassess the amount of time that I think I want to spend with the children, and that balance between work and home life. And I think a lot of people have been thinking about that. But also it has taught me that I don't think I could have been a stay-at-home mother.
Yeah. In hindsight, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It was hard, like, keeping them entertained and whatnot. I mean, I have total respect for people that do take a break and do the full-time childcare, because it is hard work.
It's a full-time job.
Yeah, absolutely, with no breaks.
Yeah.
So it's. I think a lot of people will be looking for that balance.
Yeah.
And I think that businesses will need to really seriously think about respecting that a lot more, because I think in the past businesses were kind of like, well, this is your job and I want your full focus on your job.
Mm-hmm.
And people have so many other things going on in their own lives that need attention.
And it's becoming almost, we're definitely finding, one of the first questions, it's not just about salary and package and location, it's, do they offer flexible working? Actually, most businesses are open to it now, but if they don't, then that's becoming a caveat as to whether someone wants to move forward with it. So as you just mentioned there, even just little things, like if you work from home, because we do flexible working, so, we can work from home a couple of days a week, and just, it sounds silly, but being able to put a wash on, or like just being able to to put something in the slow cooker and leave it, or whatever it may be. And I think it's just those small lifestyle changes that make all the difference, and not having to get on the tube. I mean, my commute's only 45 minutes door to door, but actually you think 2 days a week across the month, across the year, that's a long period of time. Looking at the recruitment side of things, because obviously, we were recruiters, so it's really interesting to find out about how you go about hiring the right people for your teams, or perhaps how you've done that previously.
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, you advertise a job and you get a load of CVs.
Yeah.
And if I advertised a job at Condé Nast, for example, I'd get hundreds of CVs over the weekend.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And then you've got to sort through them.
You've got to sort them. And so normally you would have, a fairly decent sort of applicant tracking system that you can try and sort of filter things through. And I got really keen to make sure that we always ask a question on any applications, and it could be anything, but it's just to get somebody to really think and to write something rather than just
click apply. Yeah. And that has changed the recruitment applying in, because cover letters used to be a big thing as well, and you used to put so much time and effort into an application, whereas now easy apply, it just takes 2 seconds.
Yeah. But that then means that you do, as somebody who's recruiting, you get hundreds of CVs, and then you have to click into each thing and see.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't necessarily me, but somebody would have to click into them and check through them, and it's just a long old job. So I quite like posing a question and just seeing how long that paragraph is. Just see how much effort somebody's put in, and it also gives somebody who's really, really keen that opportunity to show you that they're keen. So I would say if you ever apply for a job and they pose a question, please just take a minute to think about it, because that's your opportunity to sort of show how keen you are. So I'd always do that. And then obviously I would be looking for certain things on a CV. Like I said earlier, retail experience I think is amazing, and I encourage any sort of junior person within my team, if they don't have much HR experience, I would always say go and do a stint somewhere in retail, because you will get a complete overview of all the things that can happen, particularly from an employee relations perspective.
Yes.
I find that if you go into, say, media, you're not getting as much exposure to those employee relations things as you might do if you're in retail. So I would encourage people to have had that on their CV. And I would just say, structure your CV. I don't know if this is still a thing, but I was told a while back that if you put the thing that you're most wanting somebody to read, I think it's like a third of the way down a page, that's where their eyes automatically go.
Psychology of it, isn't it? Yeah. If someone only looks at a CV for 10 seconds, the first thing they're going to do is quarter way off the page. Yeah.
So I always say to people, do that. And now I'm quite conscious when I get a CV. I was like, oh, did I look a third of the way down?
We did an episode. I think one of our first episodes covered CV writing, because it was right in the middle of the pandemic where there was obviously a lot of people applying. And we talked about a couple of things. One of the most frustrating things, and this happens, people don't put their contact details on the CV. I had an amazing CV a few weeks ago, wanted to call them, but there was no email address or phone number. I was like, no.
It's just a big tease.
Yeah, but is this person real?
Yeah. And putting date of birth, I found a lot of people started to put date of birth back on their CV recently.
Yeah, I think that's, it's not a necessity at all, really, is it? I think some people perhaps are more conscious around, I guess, discrimination on ages, but I think that's a very old school thing to have to include on a CV.
And that's the problem with everything online, is that if one person posts it, even if it's not correct, it just gets out into the ether and everyone thinks it is. And that I've seen a lot of pictures go onto CVs again recently, which is definitely something that isn't necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's necessary. We even tried at M&C Saatchi, we looked at blind CVs. So, taking out names and things.
Yeah, unconscious bias, yeah.
Yeah, but what I found was if you're still advertising the jobs in the same place, you're still getting the same sorts of people.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very true.
It's more about making a bit of an effort to think about where you're advertising those roles and where you sort of want to target them, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say to anyone, really think about your CV. And the other thing, one of my bugbears is check the grammar and spelling on the CV.
Yeah. And it's so easily missed, but it's so important, especially what's more ironic is, bless them, when someone puts attention to detail as one of their skills, but attention is spelt wrong. And you just think to yourself, oh no.
I know. And just get somebody else.
Irony.
Get another pair of eyes on it.
Yes. And I am not the best speller at all, and often, even if I am writing a big email or a proposal, I always actually find enough send it to Paul, because sometimes just having a second pair of eyes makes all the difference.
What career advice would you give somebody looking to explore HR? And I'll give a bit of context around that, because as Tim will I imagine echo, I speak to a lot of people who want to get into HR. And I think perhaps in retail, it might be that mentality of perhaps like the people element to it, but perhaps not always understanding what the role actually entails, or even how to go about making that transition. So what advice would you give?
Yeah, so the entry-level positions in HR are always very admin heavy. So you're always, if you're looking at a very junior position and you're thinking, they don't necessarily have needed to have had HR experience, you'd be looking for somebody who's very organised and that attention to detail, and managing data, managing sensitive data is really key. So I'd say if you've got really good sort of IT skills and that sort of thing, that's really important, because a junior level HR position is going to be doing letters and putting people on the HR system, and I'll be doing note taking in the meeting and that sort of thing. And I think I remember when I had my sort of entry level roles that it was very admin heavy, and I just remember thinking it's going to be forever until I can do some fun stuff. But what I've learned with my teams is that those junior people, you can get them involved with some of the sort of juicy things that are going on, because they can come and sit and they can shadow you and they can take notes and things. So if you do end up in a junior position, just put yourself out there and say, like, if ever you're doing a grievance or disciplinary or redundancy or something, I'd love to help you by taking notes, or could you just talk through the case with me? Because that's what I used to do with my guys, to just be like, right, so this is happening, and I try and make it sound interesting. And these are the things you need to think about. And doing it, for example, TUPE is something, like I said, it doesn't come up very often. So when it does come up, if you're a junior member of staff and you hear these things that you haven't heard before, just make inquiries about them so that you can start to learn it. Because things like TUPE experience is quite rare. So if I ever saw a sort of a junior HR person who had TUPE experience, I'd really want to snap them up. But even if it were just like assisted on TUPE or
awareness,
it would really sort of stand out as something that, you know, I think is quite important to have learned. So yeah, I'd just say, you know, the admin side you've got to expect, but you can get yourselves involved in other things if you're willing to sort of put yourself out there a little bit and say, oh, that sounds interesting, I'd love to help you.
Yeah, great advice.
Because what's the biggest misconception, would you say? Because HR is such a broad title and there's so many elements to it, and when people want to get involved in it, they might not. Would it be the admin side, do you think?
Yeah, I think when I speak to people coming for those junior positions, I'll say, so what's attracted you to HR? And they will all say, I love working with people, and, you know, I just love, you know, the interaction with people. And I'll be like, you might just be sitting there writing letters.
There's not a lot of interaction.
I hope you like writing.
Yeah. Yeah, you might eventually get to have some meetings with people, but you're not going to be doing some heavy sort of meetings and things. So I think it's just sort of managing that expectation. And it's great that people want a career helping people. But you also have to understand with HR, there's some sides that aren't very nice to it too. You know, that if you've got to do redundancies, which unfortunately in any HR department is a thing that happens fairly regularly for whatever reason. And, you know, that can be quite tough. So you deal with some of the tougher things that happen to employees during their time at work. You know, you've had people that have had cancer, you've got people that suffer bereavements, and then you've got the side of people having babies and everything. So you've got to really think about all the different things that might happen during someone's life. It's quite likely to be getting involved in them. So yeah, I think it is a great profession to get into if you like people, but you've got to understand it's got so many different aspects to it, and if you're going to a junior position, it's going to be fairly admin heavy.
And you're not going to get to pick and choose, I guess, what you have to deal with, especially within that function of a business. I guess a good place to sort of round up the conversation on a real positive note is, you know, what would you say has been the biggest success of your career? Is there anything that jumps to mind?
Or a few top liners.
You don't have to give us one.
I have to say, like, when I was at Condé Nast, when I first started, I thought, you know, the editors obviously were all sort of celebrities almost in their own right. And I didn't get to talk to a lot of them sort of first off. And I guess with HR, one of the things I've learned is that you have to gain the respect of people in order for them to let you in and for them to let you help them. And the only way that you can really do that is by proving that you kind of know what you're doing. So I learned fairly early on that, you know, if someone wants to do something that's really tough or that they don't know how to do it, if you can be the person that steps in there and talks through a strategy on how to resolve an issue, and they see you as this confidant that can really help them, then they start to get you involved in all sorts of different things, and your relationship becomes quite interesting. And I definitely felt that. I mean, at GQ, I'm sure Dylan wouldn't mind me saying this, but he could be quite tough sometimes. And I would have meetings with him and I'd be like, oh, why do you want to do that? And eventually we were able to sort of build this rapport where I was able to work quite closely with him on things. And, you know, I was trying to get GQ to bring in sort of different sorts of people within their workplace shadowing schemes. And we did things like I worked with the Prince's Trust, and I got the managing editor to come with me to interview some young people that were struggling to look for work. And we did this session with the Prince's Trust where it was awesome. And we did these sort of interview techniques with them, and just simple things like how to shake hands and stuff.
Key stuff.
Which, I mean, they were all like, oh my God, you know, you've got people from GQ here, like, working with us. And I turned around and I saw the managing editor like dishing out his card to people, and I was like, I don't know if that's what we were supposed to do.
Here's my direct number.
But he was like, oh no, some of these people are great, like they could definitely come and do workplace shadowing with us. so that was amazing, because he wouldn't have had access to those people before, because some of those people wouldn't have even thought to apply, because they just, if you don't feel like you're going to be the type of person that will go there. So that was great to open their eyes up to that. And then the next GQ Awards that I went to, they actually gave an award to Prince Charles for his work with the Prince's Trust. And I was like, oh.
That's awesome.
Amazing.
So again, like that thing of like HR, sometimes you feel like you're in the background sort of doing things with people, but it does sort of work its way through to the wider business, and the result sometimes is a lot bigger than you expect it to be. So that was great. But yeah, and I guess working closely with those people was amazing. But then sort of bringing that into my role at M&C Saatchi, where I was able to really transform some of the policy work, the strategy around diversity and inclusion, particularly the wellbeing piece sort of over the pandemic, which was really tricky during that time. But I guess one of the things that I really enjoyed about my time at M&C Saatchi was reviewing the policies, changing all the language so that it's more inclusive, introduced like a domestic abuse policy, menopause, all of those sorts of things. And it really helped. You could sort of feel the shift in culture there, to feel like things were a lot more inclusive. And I introduced a kind of a misconduct reporting app called Vogue, which was a way that employees could raise concerns and things anonymously.
Oh, wow.
Which was amazing, because it just meant that there was this mechanism there that if people did have issues, they could tell you. But I remember when I said I wanted to do it, there was a bit of nervousness, like, oh, what are people going to use this for? And I was like,
and what's going to come out, more importantly. Yeah,
exactly. And I think whenever you think about doing things like that, that is like the thing, like, oh, are we about to realise that there's all this stuff going on?
It's got to be done.
Yeah, but I said, like, the thing is, you got to show that the company's brave enough to hear it. Whatever is going on, I want to hear it. And actually, we launched this app, and we all sort of like braced ourselves. And then the first thing that came through was someone asking for the maternity policy. So I was like, oof.
I bet when you read that, there was a sigh of relief.
I was like, oh, that's quite nice, actually. Yeah, fine. So yeah, it was, but to be able to say as a business, like, we are open to hearing what's going on. So here you go.
Powerful. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Well, look, all I can say is, thank you very much for being on. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Emily.
Is there anything that you want to add, that you feel like you haven't had the opportunity to add? That's such an interview question. I'm sorry about that.
I think for me, if you are interested in all aspects of people and the very interesting things that happen when you work with people, then I think HR is like a brilliant career for you. And I think, I do the victim support stuff because I am so fascinated in the things that go on with people and how we can all help each other. And I kind of feel like, my role within the HR space is I want people to enjoy their time at work. I think that's like my ultimate aim in life, I guess, is that I want people to enjoy their time at work and have meaningful careers and whatnot. And I guess if that resonates with you, that you feel like you'd like to do something similar, then I'd just say, like, HR might be a good thing for you to consider if you've thought about it before.
You've been listening to RHR Talks. In order to keep updated on future episodes, make sure to subscribe via Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. The best way to be kept up to date on vacancies and content would be to follow RHR on LinkedIn and register via our website at www.rhr.co.uk. If you're looking to hire and are interested in finding out more about all of the recruitment and advertising services we offer, then do reach out directly to any of our consultants or call 0207 432 8888.